Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
We get to do one of my favorite shows of the year again. We don't normally only get to do one bold prediction show a year, but since we made bold predictions and then the Big Ten canceled the season and now the season's extremely different, now we get to make an entirely new bold prediction show. So I'm really excited. How about you?
I am excited as well, Tom, and this is one of the rare shows that we prepare for. However,
Well, asterisk.
my preparation was a little off in that we did do a bold prediction show in the past. However, it was based on college football. I forgot that aspect of it, and when I went down and wrote down my bold predictions, I just went with Ohio State bold predictions. And if you'll recall, Tom, which you did not, when we did that show, we each came up with 10 bold predictions, of which I have come up with 10 bold Ohio State predictions. Tom, how many bold predictions have you come up with for your list?
Well, right now, sitting in front of me are four, encompassing both the Big Ten and college football writ large. But as we go along, I'll come up with some more as we continue to talk.
I think this is just a lesson that we should not prepare because we prepare wrong.
Exactly.
Or wrongly, to use the proper adverbiage. So yeah, we did preparation. We did not communicate. Although I like the communication that we did is the communication to people heard. No, I don't think we discussed it on the show. We just discussed it maybe after the show. Like, hey, what are we going to do? Yeah, let's do that. That was after the morning scoop. We had a really, really, really good conversation about the defensive line. If you guys have not listened to that yet, go back and check that out because you won't find it here unless Tom mislabels the show and it shows up in your feed as a Buckeye Weekly podcast.
Why would you say that? When has something like that happened? Right, and frankly, I'm a little hurt because actually it was the other way where I mislabeled the Buckeye Weekly episode and made it show up in the morning scoop feed. But that was just bonus content for our wonderful friends and listeners, so you're welcome.
Right, we were trying to cross-promote. We do need to do more cross-promotion. And in that vein, Tom, before we get started, let's just remind people Sunday nights trivia at Buckeye Scoop. You can check that out. It's free to do. Winner gets $100. Sports trivia, Ohio State trivia, $100 plus another nice prize. Which you can always find information about the trivia contest on Twitter Sunday nights at Buckeye Scoop, at Buckeye Scoop, and we'll always tweet out the information as well. And so all you need to do is sign up with an email address. It takes it's 12 questions. Starts at what, 8 or 9 p.m.
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock. Takes no more than like 6 or 7 minutes, and it's fun and it's competitive. And I'd recommend you guys do that. So Tom, let's get to these bold predictions. And since I have more than you, maybe I should go first. And then we can just mix in your 4 predictions.
Yes, why don't you do 2 predictions and then I'll do 1.
So my first here is Ohio State will have twice as many 100-yard receiving games as they did last year. Last year, they had 2. It was Garrett Wilson and either Chris Olave or KJ Hill. They only had 2 last year. So I'm thinking 4 this year, and it's bold because it's twice as many as the year before. And what I wanted to do is go really bold and take all of the 100-yard receiving games from the OSU record book, except you can't like sort them in a spreadsheet because it's all just one line, and you know how that is when you try to copy and paste into an Excel spreadsheet. And I wasn't going to go year by year. But I think there's a chance they could break the record of individual 100-yard games by different guys. And so I'm saying there's going to be, I don't know if that means 4 guys getting 100-yard receiving games, but there will be 4 100-yard receiving games. And I could see it. Olave, of course. Garrett Wilson had one last year. Jameson Williams could do that on 3 catches. And then I'm going to have to assume that I'm talking about not 4 individuals, but just 4 individual games. Is that bold, Tom?
4 individual games is not particularly bold. 4 individuals would be pretty bold, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that one of the freshmen does it. I mean, I think C.J. Saunders had a 100-yard receiving game against like UNLV in 2017, and I could see like Jackson Smith and Jigba putting up a 100-yard receiving game against Rutgers or Maryland or someone like that, where you get a catch or two in the first half, and then you're playing some extended minutes in the second half, and you have one long catch and run, and all of a sudden, boom, you're over 100 yards. So, yeah, I mean, 4 games of 100 yards total this year is not particularly bold. 4 different guys doing it, that would be pretty bold, and I could actually see that happening.
That's what I'm going with. Totally. 4 guys.
Absolutely.
I pretty much assured that 3 guys do it, right? Like the 3 starters, you just assume, and maybe that's not quite the greatest assumption with Jameson Williams, but we probably should assume it. And I don't believe, like Austin Mack, Benjamin Victor, I don't believe they ever had a 100-yard game in their 4 years, which not great.
But Jameson Williams is the kind of guy who can just, pop off get 70 yards on one catch. You beat someone deep on one play, and all of a sudden you've got one catch for 70 yards, and there's 9 minutes left in the first quarter. And like he's going to do that at some point this year, it feels like. So, and Garrett Wilson will take a slant and beat someone, or Chris Olave will run a post and beat someone, and you hit those. They have enough big play threats in the receiving game. Austin Mack was a wonderful receiver. Austin Mack was not a downfield deep play threat. Ben Victor was not really a deep play threat. When Ben Victor's longest plays, what was his longest touchdown? Probably against Penn State in 2018, right? So, and
other than the 98-yarder in the spring game.
Yes, the spring game doesn't count.
Oh,
and I think that was 99. But yeah, either 98 or 99. But yes, the
doesn't
spring
count,
game doesn't
Tom.
count. The spring game doesn't count. So yeah, I think that was 50 yards, and that was that was not a deep ball. That was just he caught one across the middle and just got some real good blocking downfield and turned it into something pretty big. So I think they have three guys who I think you could see have 50+ yard touchdowns this year, at least in that starting lineup.
Yeah, with the typical X over the past few years for the Buckeyes, 6 catches would get you about like 75 yards, 72 yards. With Jameson Williams, I could see 6 for 140, something like that, where there's a big one in there. So that is my first. You might like this one, Tom. My second one here is there will be 4 tight ends this year with touchdown catches. Now, I've gone back, and I went back 40 years, and the most I could find was 3. And it happened happened a few times. And I really, when I'm talking about like passing stats, I don't ever go past like 1989 because there's like no reason to. So maybe 4 random tight ends, and I wouldn't even know who are the tight ends and who are the fullbacks and who are the wide receivers back, in the early 80s anyway. I will say in 1999, Tom, 3 tight ends and 2 fullbacks caught touchdowns. So that's pretty interesting.
Was that a John Lumpkin, Steve Wisniewski, Kevin Hauser, Jamar Martin, and Matt Keller wasn't on the 99. Matt Keller wasn't he? Was he on the 99 team?
I believe that you got all 5 of those, Tom. I'm pretty sure you did.
That counts as that is a bold answer right there. I'm giving myself full credit for that one. That's
pretty good. I honestly, I do believe those were the 5 because as I looked them all up, and you were knocking them out there really, really good. I was thinking, was it Matt Calhoun? No, I believe it was Matt.
Yeah, Matt Calhoun was in the mid 90s because he was on that Citrus Bowl team because he's the one who got the option pitch from Bobby Hoying in his ear hole against Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl. So that would have been a few years earlier.
I'm surprised by, as I was going back through all of these stats, how many fullbacks caught touchdowns for the Buckeyes from like 1999 to like 1987. It was just almost as many as the wide receivers at some points. And it was, I don't know if that's great or if it's sad. I think one of the may have been Calhoun had like 3 touchdown catches one year. And then it's not pretty.
Well, I mean, there's a reason that Dwayne Haskins was breaking lots and lots of passing records 2 years ago, like 6 weeks into the season. And that was because they did not tend to throw the ball a whole lot back in the day. So
the 4 tight ends, Tom, and they've got 5 who could catch him, this year with Joe Royer being the 5th tight end. So I think it's a distinct possibility with Cade Stover and, getting in there late in games where you still have to get those guys get the quarterback some reps as well. And we see like Eric Moss, like in 1993, freshman tight end, even Tommy Hoying one year moved from quarterback to tight end, getting a touchdown catch late. It's just, it's just what they do. And so I'm not guaranteeing that this happens, but I will be paying close attention throughout the season.
I like the fact that the all the precedent that you're citing is from an era, the Walt Harris era, when the Ohio State offense was exactly the same as now. So definitely precedent you want to put a lot of weight on. Yeah, for sure. I think what you're going to run into is Luke Farrell, Jeremy Ruckert, Jake Hausman. I mean, off the top of my head, I think Jake Hausman has one career touchdown reception, and it was in the second half against Rutgers last year. Unless I'm forgetting one. So okay, you're going to have a limited number of opportunities for them to get him the ball, probably, especially in the goal line. Like he's not someone. Jake Hausman is not going to be a catch and run for 30 yards kind of touchdown. Like he's a you're in a jumbo package on the goal line and he leaks out the backside and you flip him the ball when he's wide open in the end zone kind of touchdown. So I mean, maybe you've got some limited possibility there, and then but if he is the sort of second half of the Rutgers game touchdown reception as a tight end, that takes that away from Cade Stover or Joe Royer or whoever else. I think that's the issue you're going to run into. I could see 3. I think 4 is really pushing it. So this is extremely bold, and I think not particularly likely to happen.
I will say half of Jake Hausman's catches last year went for touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. That's I guess that's true. And I was correct on his number of career touchdown catches.
Probably nobody needs to know that.
Okay, good.
What I don't like is you're criticizing all of my bold predictions. Either they're not bold enough, or they're too bold and not likely to happen.
Well, I think once we corrected your first bold prediction, we ended up on a particularly bold one. I like that one. 4 different guys with 100 yard. I think that is both bold and well within reason. I'm just saying I think this one is bold. I don't think it's all that likely to happen. I think that's 4 different tight ends catching. If history has taught us anything, Tony, it's that you should not bet on Ohio State tight ends doing something spectacular, and that would be like a really out of the ordinary spectacular thing. So I'm going to guess not.
I will also include. Remember when Ted Ginn lined up at tight end in 2006 against Michigan?
Yes,
I will include lining up at tight end, or even flexing and splitting out into this slot. We're also going to include these slots in this as well, probably.
Mm-hmm. So yes. So if we're including Garrett Wilson as a tight end, then yes, I think your boldness has gone down and your likelihood of being correct has gone up. See?
Good.
There you go. You're good.
All right. What do you got?
All right. First bold prediction. Michigan finishes the year with a losing record. Lose 4 games during the regular season and then lose in that championship week to Purdue or whoever is that like 4th team in the West. I mean, they do not have a gimme, and there's been a whole lot of hype coming out of Michigan sites the last week or so about Aiden Hutchinson, he's basically a Bosa, and Joe Milton, he's basically the greatest quarterback ever, and sure, there's got 4 new offensive linemen, but Ed Warner, he's basically the best offensive line coach ever. It's like, okay, well, it is September, it is early October. This is normally the time when things have started to fall apart, but this is still the preseason, which is now that, that's the time when it's still optimism time in Ann Arbor. So yeah, I'm not buying it. I think they've got, it's like, hey, so you're moving Daxton Hill to a corner spot because you don't have corners you can trust. You got 4 new starters on the offensive line. You've got Ronnie Bell back at wide receiver and not a whole lot behind him. Like, I mean, the running backs are good. That's fine, but you got 4 new offensive linemen, so that's not going to be great. You get questions on defense. I'm not seeing it. So lose week 1 at Minnesota. I'm going to say they lose at Indiana and beat Wisconsin at home, because Wisconsin now, we don't know exactly when Jack Cohn's back, but Wisconsin at home, like that's, they'll win one of those games and lose one of those games. At Indiana, home from Wisconsin. Lose versus Penn State. Lose at Ohio State. And then, they have Michigan has, if you have followed college football at all, Michigan has not traditionally done real well in bowl games under Jim Harbaugh. And I'm going to think that the championship week game, the week after losing to Ohio State, possibly in a lopsided game, probably not going to be a super motivated group. And, what's the difference between 5-4 and 4-5 if you've just lost to Ohio State by 3 touchdowns again? Like, I could see them losing to a Purdue team that's fired up, having beaten Indiana the week before in the Oak and Bucket game or something like that. So Michigan 4-5 this year.
it's bold for sure, but also not terribly unlikely. I mean, it's not. It wouldn't, I guess, shock either of us if that happened, even for a bold prediction, because of that schedule of what we know. And then do they get? Is everybody, since everybody can go to a bowl game this year, do they end up 4-6 on the season? Perhaps.
Where would they end up in a bowl game? Like I feel like I still don't have a great sense for what bowls are actually going to look like this year.
No fans travel, so like, well, I guess everybody can go to Florida. So,
but I mean, are they in like the Gator Bowl equivalent of whatever the Gator Bowl is now? Are they in that? And then they're facing, I don't know, who's the seventh best team in the SEC? Mississippi State or Kentucky. Like, I mean, you could 4-6 is not out of the question.
No, and
like, not at all.
And I'm looking at this, and I could see 6 losses in the regular +1 season.
Yeah, I mean, there are 6 losable games on that schedule without going, oh, this would be a crazy upset. And here's the other thing: their margin for error is not very big, because whatever Joe Milton is or isn't right now, if Joe Milton goes down, it's Cade McNamara and a guy that they signed as an emergency backup who was, I think, committed to Fordham before, a kid from New York State who was, I don't know, like the 1,200th overall player in the nation. They had a quarterback who had a heart issue, who they had committed for a long time, who then couldn't, was unable to play. So they had to kind of do like a last minute fill in kind of thing. So their third, I think his name is Dan Vellini, something like that. He, no offense to him, but if he's playing this fall, that is not good news for them. So you've got basically 2 scholarship quarterbacks you'd be semi-comfortable with, and then either a walk-on or a true freshman who is not ready for prime time probably right now. So in a year when everyone needs a little more margin for error, they do not have a lot of margin for error in an awful lot of spots. Although this is, I mean, we said that this is the most optimistic great time of the season for Michigan. Do you know what happened to Michigan in the polls this week?
Did they go down?
No. Michigan rocketed up from 23 to 20 in the AP poll, thanks to Texas A&M losing, Texas losing, and Mississippi State losing. So they vaulted over 3 different teams. They are also still ahead of number 23 Louisiana Lafayette, who is 3-0. So I don't know what Louisiana Lafayette has to do to look better than Michigan has by not playing this year, but they haven't done it yet.
It has been interesting and fun watching the accolades come in. You mentioned Aiden Hutchinson, whose dad is like, yeah, I think the Bosa comparisons are apt, and this is something that you and I talked about last year with Chase Young, and I'm adamant, like, stop comparing him to a Bosa. Let's not do that. And of course, I eventually was wrong. But I'm going to say the same thing here. Don't compare him to a Bosa. And I tweeted that out, and then somebody brought up a tweet that I tweeted back in like 2018 about Aiden Hutchinson and how him being in the backfield and wearing 97 is very Bosa-ish, which really annoyed me. Let me be honest with you there. But I just said Bosa-ish. I did not say that the comparisons are apt, and I think that he's going to be able to do what the Bosas do. Because Aiden Hutchinson is good, but there's, as a sophomore, the Bosas were all Americans. Mm-hmm. He was second team All Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what are the odds that Aiden Hutchinson is a top 5 NFL draft pick? Probably not super great, and that's basically where the bar is right now. So if you want to be a Bosa / Chase Young level player, that's where it is. There might be one Bosa / Chase Young level player on the Ohio State defense this year, in terms of pass rushers, and they got a lot of real good pass rushers. Is Aiden Hutchinson Tyrique Smith level good? Like, yeah, maybe. Is he Jonathan Cooper level good? Yeah, sure. Is he, pick some of those guys? Yes, absolutely. He is a good pass rusher. Does he have the ceiling that like a Zach Harrison does? Like, no, probably not. And even Zach Harrison isn't there yet. Zach Harrison has had one good season. He could end up at that level. He's not there yet. So, and Aiden Hutchinson is not there yet. And I don't think Aiden Hutchinson's ceiling is quite that high. Could he be I don't know, 20th overall pick, like sure, absolutely with a good season, absolutely. But he's not going to be the number 3 overall pick in the draft, number 2 overall pick in the draft, and that's what that means when you say Bosa.
He's also a guy, as a freshman, people were wondering, should he move to 3-tech because he wasn't doing well as a defensive end and because he is so big. Of course, I thought Joey Bosa was going to start out at defensive tackle, when they signed him because he was so big. So maybe we'll see. The Daxton Hill stuff, he's our best cover guy, but, we're going to play him at free safety, and maybe sometimes we'll put him up against somebody, but there's only there's only 2 elite receivers in the Big Ten, according to, I think, what Don Brown said, and that was Rashad Bateman and Rondale Moore. And since they probably won't play Moore until championship week, then they can keep Daxton Hill at free safety. Also, they'll slide into the nickel as well, which he did last year. But I wonder how, Chris Olave would feel about seeing this, and if this might eventually get back to him that the only elite receiver Michigan will play in the regular season is Rashad Bateman of Minnesota.
I mean, that seems like something he might get asked about the week of the Michigan game. I mean, hypothetically. And he seems like the kind of player we might get to talk to the week of the Michigan game. So we might get to find out his thoughts. Actually, that's not true. We might get to ask him about his thoughts. He won't say he won't share his thoughts, but we will not get to hear about his thoughts. Yes.
All right. So you mentioned Zach Harrison, and so that's where I'm going to go that realm with my next bold prediction, which is Tyrique Smith will lead the Buckeyes in sacks this year. While everybody is looking at Zach Harrison and expecting this jump, it sure felt like, talking to the defensive line this week, that there are some expectations for Tyrique Smith, expectations he has for himself and that his teammates have for him, that if he would just stay healthy, he is going to produce. And now what does that mean in 9-game regular season? Again, what are we talking about? 7.5 sacks, 8 sacks, something like that. So that's where I am, while we're all talking about Zach Harrison or even Baron Browning getting in there, or Jonathan Cooper finally trying to become this pass rusher that he came to Ohio State to be. I'm going to say Tyrique Smith puts it all together, leads the team in sacks, will have some sort of all Big Ten accolades. It won't be Aiden Hutchinson level, of course, but I do see, I'm going to go Tyrique Smith leading the team in sacks. Tom, how bold is that?
I'd say that's pretty bold. I mean, there are enough guys that are going to have 4 to 6 sacks that it's like, one guy has one big game and that could be enough to make him lead it. And so, I mean, really, I think putting your finger on one guy and going, this is the guy who's going to do it, that in and of itself is a little bit bold, just because there's not, and I don't think this is a year where, like last year with Chase Young, it was like, yep, this guy is going to have 1 million more sacks than anyone on the team. So just picking one guy is a little bit bold, and Tyrique Smith probably would not be the betting favorite. So yeah, I would say that is both bold and reasonable, because he's someone who, if he can stay healthy, he could very well be that guy who finishes with 8, 9, maybe 10 sacks even in that shortened season.
Okay, I like that. I'm going to go from bold and reasonable to bold and unreasonable here, probably, with this next one. The Buckeyes will trail in the game against Rutgers. Now, it's going to have to be early. I don't know if it's going to be a safety or a field goal or a first drive touchdown. But at some point in kickoff return for a touchdown, it could be, it could be anything. I mean, but it's going to have to be something quick and early, and then eventually the earth corrects itself and Ohio State runs on to a 45-point victory. So what do you think about that one, Tom? I know, unreasonable for sure.
The scenario involves Blake Haubeil kicking the ball off backwards and kicking it out his own end zone, which I think would involve a safety. I haven't ever seen that happen, but I think it would probably involve a safety.
I've seen these spinning onside kicks that come backwards. So.
Yeah, and I mean, you got to remember last year Ohio State trailed Miami 5-0 and ended up winning 676-5. So I mean, yes, it could absolutely happen. Sure, I mean, it could happen. I would not put a ton of money on that. I mean, I don't know if there's I don't know if the Ohio State Rutgers game is a big enough game that they offer like real specific prop bets, but I bet Rutgers scores first is probably going to be about a plus 800. So if you want to put some money on it, you could probably make some pretty good coin on that.
The first 3 minutes of the first quarter is a pick 'em.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, then it starts to slide Ohio State's way. So what do you got?
Next one is neither the Big 12 nor the Pac-12 gets a team in the playoff. Big 10 gets one, ACC gets one, SEC gets Alabama, and the winner of the cocktail party. But, I mean, the Big 12 already – do you know off the top of your head how many teams in the Big 12 are still undefeated?
Is Baylor? Nope. Any of them?
Oklahoma State.
There you go. That's right.
End of list. Oklahoma State, end of list. Yeah. It's like, okay, and Baylor still hasn't, or I'm sorry, Oklahoma State still hasn't played Oklahoma. Oklahoma State still hasn't played Texas. I mean, there's a long way to go, and we're still, they have exactly one undefeated team, and it's going to be, they're essentially, they're not out yet. I mean, yeah. You never know if Texas runs the table and, maybe. But, I mean, yeah, Oklahoma. I'm just pulled up Oklahoma State's schedule. Here's what they have left. At Baylor, home for Iowa State, home for Texas, at Kansas State, at Oklahoma, home for Texas Tech, at TCU. Like, this is
4 losses.
I mean, really, like, this is the year that the Big 12 feels like they don't have any terrible teams outside of Kansas, but they don't have any great teams either. It's just, this is just, during a normal conference year, this would be the year when everyone goes 7-5. Like, the Big 12 has spots 18 through 25 in the AP poll, but no one anywhere else. Like, just a bunch of like, can everyone play in the Alamo Bowl this year? Like, don't send anyone to the New Year's Six, but you get both slots in the Alamo Bowl. How about that? So, and then on the Pac-12 side, Oregon is clearly, to me, the most talented team in the Pac-12, but I mean, they've had some guys opt out. And they're not so much more talented than anyone else that they can afford to lose a couple top level guys and then still be okay and still be clearly more talented than anyone else. They wrap up the season with Washington. That's a losable game. I think they open with Stanford. That's a potentially losable game. I mean, there's just and the margin for error for the Pac-12 is so thin because they're only playing 6 games plus a championship game. So, you're not getting in at 5-1, or 6-1 as a Pac-12 champion. Like, you have to run the table in the Pac-12 because the respect for the Pac-12 is just not there, rightly or wrongly. And, you're playing 3 fewer games than an SEC team. And I think a Big Ten champion with 1 loss gets in, over a not at 1 loss non-SEC champion. But I don't think a 1-loss Pac-12 champion gets in over just about anybody unless everybody else has 2 losses. So I'm going to say it's Big Ten champion, ACC champion, Alabama, and whoever wins the cocktail party. Where am I wrong there?
I don't think you necessarily are wrong, which must mean that it may not be all that bold, Tom. I don't mean to be insulting. I do wonder. I think that not only does the Pac-12 does the team have to go undefeated, but they have to look good doing it, and you can't back into any wins because it's the eye test, all that crap this year. And I do wonder, like, if you've got 10-1 Texas or whatever they would be having just 1 loss, but everybody knows, like, the Big 12 is like, ugh, like, do you take a 7-0 like USC or Oregon over a 10-1 or I don't even know what 9-1 Texas or whatever, a 1-loss Texas? Like, who do you side with for anybody from the Big 12, a 1-loss Big 12 team over an undefeated Pac-12 team? Because, and again, that's why I say the Pac-12 will have to, whoever it is, they're going to have to look dominant, and then it becomes less of a decision, less of a tough decision.
I think the hardest thing for the Big 12 teams this year, other than the fact that none of them have any margin for error anymore outside of Oklahoma State, is even if they're dominant, how dominant can you look if you don't play defense? Like,
exactly.
56-42 doesn't read as a dominant win. You have to beat people 56-7, and Texas's defense is not a 56-7 kind of team. Oklahoma's defense is not a 56-7 kind of team. And, Oklahoma State, I think, has been okay, but their offense hasn't been fantastic. Like, they look like crap against Tulsa week 1. And again, like, I think there's a lot to be said for kind of writing off those week 1 results a little bit, but still, they haven't looked incredible, Oklahoma State, in either of their last couple of games. And so, yeah, I don't think I can see a way that the Big 12 gets a team in this year, because you don't have an undefeated team. You're really functionally not going to have an undefeated team. And I don't think you're going to have the eye test or game control or whatever term you want to use to be, make a real emphatic case that, we are the best of the one-loss teams. I mean, Oklahoma is already not going to be one of the best one-loss teams because they've already lost 2 games, and that was, the team that a lot of people thought was going to be their best playoff contender. So, and Oklahoma could very easily beat Texas, and then Texas has 2 losses, and those 2 teams are out of the playoff race, and it's not even the middle of October yet. So, it's this would be a crazy year to have 2-loss Texas, 2-loss Oklahoma at this point of the year if they had started playing on Labor Day weekend, and they've played fewer games than that, and they're already basically out.
Yeah, the only reason I haven't said the Big 12 is out is because I'm waiting for Oklahoma State to lose. I think Texas is done. I just a 14-0 win can be dominating. A 56-42 cannot. You mentioned that kind of score. I mean, we saw that with the 2007 Michigan-Ohio State game. What was it, 14-3? But Michigan was completely dominated in that game. And it's hard to dominate a team that just scores like 40 or 39 or 42 on you. So, I am with you. Like, I think that is the most likely scenario, unless can Wisconsin maybe be the other team rather than the SEC getting a second team in there. But I think it's Georgia plays Alabama this year, so that's going to be they would have to play lose to Alabama and then beat Florida basically, and then can you put a 2-loss Georgia in there if they lose in the SEC championship game? Then I don't think you can.
Yeah, I mean that would be tough. I mean, you'll have all the people who are going to maybe making that argument, but
they only lost to one team, Tom.
Exactly. Yes. So
Paul.
It's not a guarantee. I could see at that point, if Florida only has 1 loss and it's a very narrow loss to Georgia, and Georgia has 2 losses both to Alabama, I could see people making an argument for either one of those teams. Well, certainly we can all agree that one of them is the 4th best team in the country. Like, you could absolutely see that coming. And Georgia is a team that probably will have that kind of eye test kind of. They've got the defense to have an eye test kind of year where that's a real good defense. And I think the offense is coming along. I'll be real interested to see what Stetson Bennett looks like against a good defense, because I don't think he's faced one yet. I don't think Auburn is nearly what they were sold to be. But yeah, I think Georgia has a decent possibility of sneaking in as that number 4 seed, just with that defense and with all the the fact that the SEC is always going to get the benefit of the doubt, and they came in with the hype, and they have the they have just the talent on the roster to just sort of be able to do it. So yeah, I think that's what I would view as the most likely way that the playoffs shakes out right now.
I think what will happen at the end is the committee will put all of these for the 4th team, just put a bunch of names in a houndstooth hat. They'll draw out a name. Who knows what name that could be from what conference? You never know.
Bama made it twice? Wow, that's crazy.
And they're going to play each other, and that way they can guarantee themselves a berth in the title game. So, Tom, my next one, as I look here, and what do I want to see? The first true freshman to start a game for the Buckeyes this year will be G. Scott. And I say that because the first play of one particular game will be a running play, and they want him in there for blocking. And I say that because of the clip of the circle drills that Ohio State tweeted out yesterday, I think, where he's pushing Ryan Watts to the county line, basically like the old Dukes of Hazzard, when you chase somebody to the county line and you can't go past that, the cops can't go past it. He basically put Ryan Watts on the other side of the county and was like, don't come back. Like in Rambo, First Blood. When Brian Dennehy drove Rambo across the bridge and said, don't come back into our county. And then Ryan Watts tried to come back into the county.
I was going to say, I'm not sure you remember how that movie ended. That Brian Dennehy is not the one who ended up winning that movie, as far as I recall.
I stopped watching it.
Yeah.
It was rated R. I was 9. I just assumed, well, and then Rambo walked away and found a happy life and was never never suffered any kind of post-traumatic stress, or never had to go into the Middle East for some reason to save some people, and certainly never killed a bunch of cops in the woods.
No, never, and never entered any arm wrestling tournaments either. I mean, that's, again, I may be confusing different. I'm not sure. I'm sure Not Sure Over the Top was technically in the a Rambo canon movie, but I mean, it's fine.
I love Over the Top. I had it on VHS. We watched it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, yeah, that's a reasonable guess. I mean, there's not that many guys who are going to be in that mix for a starting spot this year, and you could argue CJ Stroud there, that if something happens to Justin Fields and the indication is that CJ Stroud is the likely backup, he's a decent pick there. But if it's not him, it's going to be one of those wide receivers. And, again, if it may just come down to, if one of the wide receivers gets hurt, who's, which one of the wide receivers gets hurt that their backup is playing, and it's one of those guys. But yeah, G. Scott's as good a guess as any there.
Thank you. Next, let's go here with another about the freshmen. 6 true freshmen will score this year. And I went through last, 10, 15 years, and the most I saw was 5. And so you're talking at least 3 of the receivers, right? Mayan Williams will probably get one. Marcus Crowley scored last year.
Yep.
And then does CJ Stroud or Jack Miller run one in? And is there a defensive score as well?
Or Joe Royer scores a touchdown and you hit 2 of your predictions?
Hey, I'm not trying to double up here, but I think there is boldness there, because it will require either a Mookie Cooper, a Joe Royer, or defense, assuming that one of the quarterbacks score as well. And then, of course, not throwing the touchdown wouldn't count. However, what would count is I'm going to count a safety. I know the defensive player does not get credit for those points, but here, where we are not beholden to NCAA rules of time, and we do not like the NCAA, so we should not be following their rules for our bold predictions. Or maybe, true freshman kicker. Ohio State has one, perhaps. We don't know. Maybe he scores as well.
Now, what's going to be really great is when you have your one short, and Darian Henry Young gets held in the end zone, and you're like, well, he didn't actually hit the quarterback, but the holding on him counts as a safety. So therefore, yes. I think, and then we have a really long, drawn out argument, in like mid-December about this. Yeah, that is definitely how this is going to end. Yeah, that is pretty bold, just because it's like, you say, 6, that's not that many, and they're going to have a bunch of games where they're playing second halves. And, I think 3 wide receivers are the over-under on the number of true freshman wide receivers who score a touchdown is probably about 3 or 3.5. So I think you've got a decent chance there. And, you've got Joe Royer, you've got Mayan Williams. You could hit the 4 wide receivers, Joe Royer, Mayan Williams, and then you're there. Mm-hmm. And I bet CJ Stroud runs in a touchdown at some point this year. It's not out of the realm of possibility you could hit 7 there, even without having someone on defense score. And I mean, you got to remember, freshman year, 7 Banks picked up a block punt and scored a touchdown. Like that sounds kind of crazy when you start thinking about it. Like, that's a lot of true freshmen in a relatively short season, and there's no MAC games, so you're not going to get a Rajay Burns pick 6 against Bowling Green kind of thing. But yeah, I could actually see that happening.
Thank you. You're up.
All right. As of playoff selection day, there will only be 2 or fewer unbeaten teams in the nation. I think Alabama's 1. I think Ohio State is 1. But, Clemson probably has to play Notre Dame twice, probably. I think Notre Dame probably gets them once. I could see that Clemson losing at Notre Dame and then Clemson beating Notre Dame in the ACC championship game. Clemson probably takes care of Miami this week. The Big 12 already down just to Oklahoma State. We talked about the Pac-12 being down, to the point where it's probably like just balanced enough that they're not going to be able to do anything about, that Oregon's not going to be able to run the table. USC's not going to be able to run the table. And, if one of them does, they have a decent chance of losing in that Pac-12 championship game. Outside of that, I mean, honestly, the one that gave me the most pause was BYU. BYU looks real, real, real good right now. But BYU has a trip to Boise State later in the year. They get San Diego State at home right at the end of the year. I mean, BYU is the team that, if you're going to have another team, I think it's more likely that BYU goes undefeated than Oklahoma State or someone like that. But
especially if they played each other.
Yeah. But I think BYU slips up at some point. That's just a lot to ask. But yeah, I think you're going to have, even in a shorter season, Alabama and Ohio State are the only two that I think have a decent chance of going undefeated. And it would not completely shock me if there was no undefeated team this year, just because it's such a weird year, and you're going to have a week when people are shorthanded or whatever.
I think it's bold to say that Clemson is going to lose. Notice you did not say they were going to lose this week against Miami.
No.
Which, Tom, the U is back. I don't know if you've heard.
I have heard I think that was the same people that were telling me Texas was back a couple weeks ago. So,
but this one is real.
This one's real. I mean, sir, have you seen the amount of bling in the turnover chain this year, sir? There is a significant amount of bling, which would therefore indicate the U is back.
The defense rests, although it doesn't because it keeps getting bling. Get it? The defense.
Got
it. What about if Cincinnati, or an AAC team, is the only undefeated team in the nation? Everybody loves the AAC. They're the fifth conference, or they're the fifth and a half. The people say that, and then when they have to vote them into the college football playoffs, they don't. So can an undefeated AAC team make it if they are the only undefeated team? Do you think would this be the year, especially with no Big 12, no Pac-12?
Yeah, I think you're going to have such a drumbeat for whoever that second SEC team is that it's not going to happen. I mean,
Tom, actually, not to interrupt you, it's not a drumbeat. It's like pounding their bare feet on the porch. That's what that is.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. And then a clap
and on a knee, and then also some spoons, I think. It's more of a spoon beat. Sorry.
Here's the issue with Cincinnati. Cincinnati is playing like the poor man's Big 12 schedule this year, where they're not playing anyone incredible. I mean, they beat Army, they beat USF already. But here's what they have coming up. They're off this week, then at Tulsa, and Tulsa's fine. Tulsa's not incredible. Tulsa's fine. At SMU. SMU is 4-0 right now. Home for Memphis. Home for Houston. Then they've got a Friday nighter against ECU, and they finish at UCF at Temple. There's no game on that schedule that is like they are going to lose that game. It is entirely possible that they could be favored in every single one of those games outside of maybe at SMU, maybe. But there's also not, I mean, how many gimmies are there on that schedule? They're going to beat ECU. Absolutely, they'll beat ECU. Houston at home, they should beat Houston at home. At SMU, that's a little dicey. At Tulsa I think you got a 25% chance of losing that one. And then home for Memphis. Memphis is pretty solid this year. At UCF, again, UCF is fine, but they're not bad. And at Temple is you could see them just blowing it at Temple at the last week of the season. Absolutely. So they have the Big 12 problem where they don't play anyone incredible, and they don't play anyone that's going to be a real resume win for them. But also they do not have a schedule where you can take a week and go, we'll just kind of mail it in this week, mm-hmm. and we'll be fine. They don't have a huge talent advantage. And when you're playing a schedule like that this year, you're going to have the 1 week when someone gets sick or someone gets hurt, and then you get got.
That's where you'd have to win every single game this year by 30, and that's not something a Jim Tressel disciple can do or would do or does.
Yeah, I mean they beat Army by 14. They beat USF by 21. And USF is not very good this year.
Mhm.
So the Army's a good team, but I mean if you watch that Cincinnati Army game, that was like it was real low scoring and their defense looked really good. Army's only touchdown in the game was on defense, I believe, or at special teams. But it was it wasn't. You don't beat Army impressively. Like that's just not how it works. Like just beating Army is an impressive win over Army because you can't you don't blow Army out. That's just not how it works.
All right, I'm going to here's my next bold prediction. Ohio State wins every Big Ten game that they play by at least 14 points. I think they might be favored. They're going to be favored close to, that in every game. They won't be favored by that much in every game, but it's going to be close. So I am going to say 2 touchdowns every single game, including at Penn State, Michigan game at home, the Rutgers game, even though that will be a comeback victory. Yes, it will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I'm going 14 plus in every single Big Ten game, Tom.
I'm looking back to last year. Did they do that last year? I think they beat Wisconsin by 13 and they beat Penn State by 11.
Yeah,
so
totally different.
Yeah, I don't see that happening this year. I don't think they're going to do that. I think you're going to have a week when you're a little off, or you're going to have the Penn State game will be they'll win impressively, but they'll win by 10 or something like that. I think winning by 14 plus is it's asking a lot, and you're gonna, you might get backdoored on one of those where you have, you're up by 17 and then, the other team scores with 3 minutes left and then you win by 10, you're going to have one of those deals. They lead every game by 14 points at some point. Yeah, absolutely. I could see that happening. But it's going to be very hard. I think you look at last year's Ohio State team, and that is the most consistent Ohio State team I think I've ever seen, where they just came out every week and just smushed people. And even that team didn't do it because you had kind of a sloppy game against Penn State where they had some turnovers and Fields got hurt, and then you win that by 11. And then you come out, the third tough game in a row against Wisconsin, and you fall behind at halftime. And then you come back and win it, but you win it by 13. And that was, like I said, the most consistent Ohio State team I think I've ever seen. So if they couldn't do it, I don't think they're going to do it this year.
All right, Tom. That counts as a bold and possibly unlikely, which is fine. I don't mind.
The early safety that Rutgers gets holds up. Final score: Ohio State 14, Rutgers 2, and you miss it. There you go.
That would be devastating.
That would be.
And that would not be my fault. That would be Ohio State's fault and the players for being terrible people, terrible humans, and letting all of us down. My next one. 7 Buckeyes with a play from scrimmage of at least 50 yards. The best I could find over the last 10, 15 years was 6.
7.
So you're talking probably both, Trey Sermon and Master Teague.
Mm-hmm.
At least 4 receivers. And Justin Fields did have a 52-yarder last year. Could Jeremy Ruckert get in there? Possibly. So there's a reason that 7 hasn't been done. And like I said, I went back to maybe like 2009, 2010, and 6 was the most. I assume, I don't know, did the 96, 98 team, 96, I don't know, Joe Montgomery, Michael Wiley, David Boston, D. Miller, maybe one other, so I think it's pretty rare, maybe never have been done before. And for that reason alone, it's bold. But Tom, how likely?
Very bold, not real likely. That's just a lot. I mean, you think 50-yard plays, you're like, oh yeah, they probably have, I don't know, 3 of those a week. It's like, no. No, they do not. No, 50-yard plays are not nearly as common as you think they are. And if you have a 50-yard play every week, it's like, oh, that's a pretty good explosive offense. And you only have so many weeks this year. So, and again, you don't have the Bowling Green game. You don't have the Buffalo game now this year. So you're trying to do this. Your number of like wildly overmatched opponents is way down this year. You know, your wildly overmatched opponent list is what? Rutgers and at Maryland and at Michigan State. And just, I mean, at Michigan State just feels like that's just a December game in East Lansing does not feel like it's going to be a cornucopia of explosive plays. Like that just feels like and at Illinois the Saturday after Thanksgiving, like again, that does not feel like that's going to just be bombs away in Champaign in late November. So, yeah, I think you're gonna run into an opportunity issue where you don't have that many opportunities where you have like just really putrid opponents. And again, like 50-yard plays do not happen nearly as often as people I think probably think that they do.
Oh, and Ohio State had 15 of them last year. 5 of them took place in September. And so then it was in October, they had 5. In November, they had 3. And then in December, January, they had 2. So you take out the September, that's 10. And can 7 guys find those 10 that they did last year or more? Because, Tom, I also think there's going to be more reason to score in the second half this year and even in the fourth quarter than maybe there was last year, where I'm not saying the defense is going to be like 2018, but I think there may be more the offense may need to stay in the game longer than they did last year, so there's more opportunity there. But I do get annoyed that the number of games is lessened, because as I'm looking at they've never done this before in 13 or 14 or 15 games. I'm going to say they're going to do it this year. And then you remember they can only play 11 games this year, you idiot. And it's like, it's a podcast. Who cares?
Yeah, they're playing like a 1968 schedule this year, so it's not you don't have quite the number of opportunities you have. Like
I do not.
Here's a bold prediction: they're not going to break any total yardage records this year for season yardage or scoring touchdowns. Gonna just go right on a limb on that one.
All right,
Past
now you've
attempts,
got 5 bold predictions for
there
fun.
you go.
Good job.
There you go. Yeah, I could see if you're going to have would you say 7 guys with score plays of more than 50 yards?
Yep.
Now
from scrimmage.
From scrimmage. So does an interception return count? Because like Damon Arnett had like a 90-something.
I'm going to say it does.
Return. Yeah, I think maybe you steal one there. I mean, like Damon Arnett had what 97 yard touchdown and return last year against Indiana.
Technically, it does not count in this instance, but in this instance, it does.
Yes. Yeah, if you remove the word from scrimmage, then I guess I think maybe. I mean, but again, like you're relying on someone just picking off a pass in the flat and just going straight down the sideline for 50-something yards. Like that. Sure. I mean, possible. I could, you put Sean Wade on that list, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's a little bit, because there's, like I said, as you're going through that list, it was like, yeah, that works out to about 1 a week. Like it's okay. So you figure they're going to get 10, 11, something like that. What are the odds those are broken down into 7 different people? Not real good, because I think I would bet on at least a couple of those wide receivers having multiple of those 50-yard plays this year. So there's not that many more to go around. All right. My last one, this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Michigan still announces a crowd of 100,000 for their home games this streak to keep their season alive, their streak alive since 1975. Because, I mean, if you remember the 2014 season, especially the Maryland game in 2014, if they announce a crowd of 100,000 for the 2014 Maryland game, I mean, absolutely. If it's just parents in the stands, sure. There's 100,000 of them. The camera has just been too tight. You haven't been able to see it, but.
Yeah, it's like jazz. You got to count the fans that aren't there.
Yeah, exactly.
I do. I think Nebraska has put their streak counting on hold this season.
Well, there's a sellout streak, and they will fill every seat. I don't think there's any reason you need to. The way their streak is framed, like it's a sellout streak. Every seat that is available will be sold, so it's a sellout.
I do like how they don't want to necessarily expand because it might cost them their sellout streak. But it is good to be wanted. But getting back to Michigan, the unwanted. Yeah, of course. I mean, it's arguably the greatest streak in sports. So I don't know why you would go
Very
against it. Not that
arguably.
how they wouldn't even need to. Sure, you're not even allowed to watch anything anywhere in the state of Michigan, but they'll get 100,000 in there. In fact, when you look at the box score, it'll probably be like 103 218. It's like it won't be exactly 100,000 because there'll be more than that there. You got to count the families and the media as well.
100,001, and the one is the Fielding Yost seat that they have saved somewhere in the stadium. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, they'll keep that streak alive because.
Speaking of Michigan, Tom, I'll go back to my last two bold predictions, and then we can get out of here. Ohio State will score 50 or more points against Michigan. Now, I know, Tom, you're going to say, well, they've done that each of the last 2 years.
Well, Tony, they've done that each of the last 2 years.
However, they've never done it 3 years in a row. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, but Tony, they've never done it 2 years in a row before last year.
But
and
Tony,
that's true.
They've never done it 2 years in a row before last year.
But they've also never done it 3 years in a row. And that's what makes this bold. And Tom, let me add another thing for you here. I was just going through looking at the wins and everything. Before Jim Tressel came along, Michigan was 16-0 against Ohio State when they scored 27 or more points. Since his arrival, Michigan is now 2-6 in games against Ohio State where they score 27 or more points.
Interesting. That's a pretty good stat. Now, I think
that's painful for Michigan fans.
Yeah, there's probably something there that has to do with the overall number of points scored in the game of college football and the tempo and all of that. But yeah, I mean, there's that famous stat that Ohio State is 300 and something 1-1 when they score 35 points, and they lost to Clemson in the Orange Bowl and they tied SMU 35-35 or something a million years ago. But yeah, that is quite a stat. That's one of those that tells a couple different stories. One is the change of the offense in college football, and two is the change of the Ohio State-Michigan series in the last 20 years or so.
Definitely. So bold prediction 50 is that bold?
I don't think that's particularly bold. I mean, Ryan Day has promised twice that. So really, I think extremely not bold. I think that's right up there with Justin Fields winning the Heisman or whatever your prediction was over the summer. Is that your last one?
Let's go to my 10th and final bold prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Fields will win the Heisman, Tom. And I do believe it is bold because he hasn't even played a game yet, and he's not the Heisman favorite now. He's not even a tight end for Florida. So there's a lot of guys in front of him right now. I've seen him, there's like 5 or 6 guys ahead of him. I've also seen only one guy ahead of him. So, it's not the least bold thing said today. That may have been Ohio State scoring 50 points against Michigan. But I am going, and I know you gave me grief the first time we did this by saying, oh, really? It's a bold prediction predicting the Heisman favorite will win the Heisman, which is bold because it never happens. So take that. But now he's no longer the favorite, which makes this even more bold. It was always bold. Now it's continued to be bold.
I like the fact that you've set this up where if he's the favorite, it's bold. And if he's not the favorite, it's bold. Good. That's how things work. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think you might've been the one who tweeted out the Heisman odds earlier this week, and he was like 7-1 and like 4th or 5th on the list. And that's actually pretty intriguing. And I looked at that and I thought, my first thought was, those are pretty good odds. Like that might be worth throwing some money down on that if you are so inclined. But the second thing was, I wonder if that's indicative of how the voting base is going to view teams that play fewer games. Is Justin Fields going to, playing fewer games, playing games at Illinois, playing games at Michigan State late in the season where you're not going to pile up big yardage? Like it's just, he's the Illinois game, he's going to go 12 for 17 for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they'll win, but it's just, you're not going to be bombing it all over the field against Illinois. And so then you have, a lot of your last impressions on the voting base are just kind of like unimpressive games because of the conditions alone. So that I think is going to hurt him. And the other thing is, if the narrative all year is about how great the SEC is, and Lord knows the narrative all year is going to be about how great the SEC is, like Mac Jones. Mac Jones is, I don't know where Mac Jones was on those Heisman odds, but Mac Jones, if he puts up 400 and whatever yards like he did last week for Alabama pretty frequently, if he's putting up 2 in numbers and he stays healthy, he's probably going to be a Heisman finalist. So there's one. Trevor Lawrence is probably going to be a Heisman finalist. There's 2. You're going to have
Kyle Trask was in there.
Kyle Trask. I mean, so someone from the SEC East, whether it's someone from Florida, someone from Georgia, someone is going to be an SEC, another finalist there. And you may just get the real parochial SEC voters who are just keeping they have 3 Southern players on their ballot because well, look, Fields barely threw for 150 yards against Illinois. How could you even put him on your ballot? And yes, of course, there's a reason for it, but the herpy derpies down south don't always get past the parochialism. So yeah, I think there's a reason to think that's like a pretty intriguing 7-1 number. But yeah, if he's unless he's like completely on fire for the first half of the season, and he might be, but even if he is, then the narrative is going to be, he kind of trailed off towards the end of the year because he's playing outdoors in Champaign and East Lansing towards the end of the year, and that's not real conducive to big numbers.
Kyle Trask was the number 2 guy behind Trevor Lawrence at 15-4 odds, which is slightly better than the 4-1 of Mac Jones. Tom, you can get Stetson Bennett 18-1.
Mm-hmm. I could. What if I just held my lighter up next to this dollar bill and set it on fire? Would that be a better bet, or
similar? I think that'll do it, Tom. We have all of our bold predictions out of us. That was good. I feel better about my boldness as opposed to the first time we did this show. I left the show thinking I could have done better and I should have put in more work. And this time I did put in more work. I just forgot where it should have been put. So I apologize for that. Although, Tom, you also forgot as well. Only 4 predictions as opposed to the 10 that we each had last time. But I think it worked out well because if you had 10, we would have been here for another 2 hours.
Well, and I think the important thing is the variety. Yes. In the variety of ways that we have failed the listeners today. And that's, I think, that helps keep things fresh, keep things new, keep them on their toes. I think that's really the important thing. So by failing the listeners in different ways, we have really delivered for the listeners. And I speak for both of us when I say, you're welcome.
Like Tony Alford said, you don't want 2 running backs who do the same thing.
Exactly.
You don't want 2 guys on a podcast who screw up the same way. You want them to screw up differently, and that's what we've done. And as Tom said, you're welcome. So we'll even thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening as always. We ask that you continue to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. If you're not yet a member, please do so. Camp is going on. There's stuff behind the paywall right now that you would be interested in. I'm a little afraid to say everything that's going on back there right now, simply because I don't want to get anybody in trouble, Tom. So, not to be mysterious, but there's some interesting stuff that you'll find there as well. So give that a check. Continue to listen to the podcast. Continue to check out Tom Orr on the Morning Scoop. I was on there this morning talking about the defensive line. Pretty good episode. Tom, who's on tomorrow's show?
Well, that's a mystery. That's an exciting mystery. And some may say, I bet that's because he hasn't determined who's going to be on the show yet. But there's only one way to find out. Listen to tomorrow's show. It'll be great. Yeah, and if you're wondering why we did not do a normal Buckeye Weekly review of the defensive line, it's because we basically had our Buckeye Weekly review of the defensive line conversation on the Morning Scoop. So you can just find that episode. The episode is called Deep Dive on the Defensive Line. And as I said at the end of that episode, if you're the type of person who thinks a deep dive on the Ohio State defensive line is something that you would like to listen to, you are probably the type of person that would enjoy a subscription to Buckeye Scoop, because there it is kind of deep dives on just about everything there, from recruiting to X's and O's with our X's and O's guru Ross Fulton, and a whole bunch of other great content there. So if you're the type of person that listens to this show pretty frequently and is thinking about Ohio State football more than just on game days, you are probably the type of person that would enjoy a subscription to BuckeyeScoop.com.
Absolutely. So thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys later.